Evening, Canby. We are here for the City of Canby budget meeting on May 29th, 2025. This meeting was carried over from May 22nd, 2025. And we'll do roll call. We'll start with over here and we'll work our way around and then go.
Jack Pendleton, Budget Committee.
David Tate, Budget Committee.
Dan Stearns, City Council.
Tracy Hensley, Council President.
Kim Ligand, Budget Committee Chair.
Brian Hodson, Mayor.
Jim Davis, City Council.
Jason Patton, City Council.
Paul Waterman, City Council.
Eileen Stein, City Administrator.
Scott Schlag, Finance Director.
Katie Joyner, Financial Analyst.
Eric Leifman, Katy Swim Center. Second Dolls, County Police. Don Hardy, Planning Director.
Monica Stone, Public Works. Marissa Ely, Library Director. Jamie Stickle, Director of Economic Development.
Son Hood, Transit Fleet and IT.
Brian Potter, Planning Manager.
Roberts, Work Supervisor.
Eddie Miller, Creative Operations.
Spencer Paul, Public Works.
Tyler Iser, Economic Development, Tourism Coordinator.
Maya Benham, Administrative Director and City Recorder. Teresa Ridgely, Deputy City Recorder.
And we have Sean Varwig on his way, Budget Committee member, and
I have a message out to Council Maldonado.
we are not sure about Counselor Maldonado. All right,
Maybe he's still at work, but we're trying to find him.
all right. So we are ready to have our discussion on the parking lot list. So Eileen, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. And before we get started, I just want to remind you, if you are not speaking, to turn your microphone off. And if you're eating or crumpling candy wrappers, that's all that, and you have your mic on, that's all that the mic picks up. So just be cognizant of that. So we can hear your deliberations rather
And
than
if you
your,
are speaking, turn on your mic.
yes, and if you are, yes.
Paul's got it covered over here. It's a team effort.
Okay, with that, how did I do, Todd? Did I? Got it, okay, great. So, council, we are down to the parking lot list of items for your consideration tonight. As you know, you had a very robust discussion about items that you wanted on the parking lot list and those that you did not. The first thing I wanted to ask is there anything that got left off the list that you were expecting to see?
Yes, Council President Hensley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief Charles not here tonight?
He's running late. He's coming from another city.
Okay. My first item that wasn't on the list came about because of an email that we had received since the meeting that we had a captain that has resigned/retired, and we've had him on paid administrative leave. So for 6 months, we've lived without this position being filled. I'm using air quotes for those who can't see that. I'm thinking that that could be something we could look at going without filling that position. We've survived 6 months now without that position being filled. Can we use those funds in other funds? And I wish that Tro was here to speak to that, because that was a big question I had on my brain all weekend.
I can tell you that that position is very important, and that Chief and I have been working more than we have in the past. Many times we had to.
Is your mic on? It's just hard to hear you, and I'm sure that the camera's not picking you up either.
I'll sit from here.
Thank you, Jose.
Apologize for that.
That's okay. But no, it's been on my brain all weekend. It's like, well, if we've lived this long without this position being filled, can't we just like hang it out for a little while longer and use those funds for other funds that obviously are needing attention?
I understand your position. I can tell you that position is very important for the Canby Police Department. In the past 5 months, roughly, with with the work that Captain was doing, is basically, I passed some of that work, so some of the sergeants, the chief and I. So our workload has accumulated tremendously. And in September, we got to do accreditation, which takes a lot of work, and it's due in September, and we're working on that. So not having the captains is a very, it's going to be detrimental to our department.
Okay. I'm just wondering if we've gone this long without him in that role,
Yes.
going forward 12 more months, that disbursement of his tasks amongst others is not attainable?
I mean, anything is attainable. What I'm saying to you is in September, the accreditation, which is required by law, at state law, to get it done, is going to be a tremendous amount of work. It takes one person to concentrate on that work. We're looking to, if when Captain Miller resigns, sometimes to look for a new replacement right away so we can implement that accreditation that is needed to be approved. We can get an extension sometimes from the state for another 2 or 3 months. But with that said, it takes a lot of work to get it done. And then we got to renew it every 3 years. I think, having said that, I understand that we went throughout with that person for about 5.5 months. But I can tell you, I've been working, if you can check on our finance records, usually we work 40 hours. I've been working a little more than 40 hours a week just to catch up and on my weekends, and the chiefs too, just to try to stay afloat with the department. And it's a position that is needed. It's like once you take that position away forever or for 6 months, it's going to be, I can tell you, it's going to be detrimental to the department.
All right, don't get me wrong. As you know, for the last decade and a half, I've been very supportive of the police force.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to pick you apart. I just want to understand. So I'm wondering, okay, so we've lived this long without it, and in the email, it was indicated that it would be promoted within and backfilled, as I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And so we need that backfilled position?
Yes. I will try to make something that maybe will make some sense. I know it may sound a little different, but let's say if you start for a while, you don't eat any proteins for a while, you're going to be fine for 2-3 days, maybe a month or 2 months. But after 3 or 4 months, your bones and your body is going to start deteriorating and you're going to break. Once you break, it's going to be really hard to recuperate from that. So it's important, yes, we're in a diet right now. It's very hard, but at one point, if we stop eating that protein, we're going to break. And it's important to keep that department healthy.
Good analogy. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, did you have a question?
Question, comment. Sorry. Captain Gonzalez, thank you for being here. I guess that to kind of follow up on Council President Hensley's comments. So the position is being open, we're promoting from within. So it's a sergeant, is it a sergeant position that we're going to have to hire out for or promote from?
Yes.
Okay, and the sergeant position is also going to be an internal, or is that going to be an external search?
We're going to look internal first. We'd
Okay.
like to try promote within, because it's important to give that option to the department, that people can grow. It gives opportunities to the departments. If nobody wants that position, we'll probably have to go outside, It's just the normal protocol. But at this point, we're thinking from within.
So so short end being the promotion from within, long-term having to go out and recruit it, what's that time frame look like?
As you know, anytime you're going to hire a police officer, it takes a period of time. If we were to promote from within a captain. It's already, somebody already has a background, it's already working for us. It'd be a smooth transition to get that person plugged in and start working on our accreditation right away, which is due in September. The rest, promoting a sergeant, we can have an active sergeant working in the meantime until we promote from within, and we can do that fairly quickly because it's already personnel that is working for the department. The other end, it'd be hiring a new police officer to replace those. Those will take a long time. And when I'm saying a long time, we got to basically advertise for it. If we get a lateral police officer, it takes shorter time to put them on the road. It may take between 3 to 4 months. If we get somebody brand new, as you know, they're going to have to go to the academy for 16 weeks. They'll come back to the PD and be there for another 6 months until they're basically solo. They can produce and work solo in the PD, for the PD and for the city. So we're looking at new officers at least good a year before they get plugged in. For the captain position, if we hire from within, we can immediately plug that person in right away. They're already familiar with the PD, and that will be a smooth transition. The same for the sergeant.
So here we are, been 5 months already, but then if the dominoes all fall into place and having to hire a new officer, that's still going to create a period of time where now you're still down.
Yes,
and,
we're going to be having that.
recruiting, hiring, training, all that, and then incurring overtime as well at those lower levels, correct?
Yes.
So, and here's the other piece for me on this, for all y'all to consider, is it took us a long time. It took us almost 10 years to be able to get some of the position that Captain Gonzalez is talking about, getting that filled and having that position for supervision and for leadership development on our police force. And so it would be, to his point, I think we eliminate that position, it would get, it's a ripple effect that becomes harder for us to handle and backfill or reinstate in coming years. So that's why I asked those questions. So thank you, sir.
Counselor Patton?
Yeah, I don't know if other people have questions about this topic, but I have a question for a different topic.
I have this topic.
All right, Counselor Stearns, let's stay on
Let's
this
stay on the same topic, yeah.
Did you have a question too, or?
No.
Okay. Oh, if I'm following this correctly, if everything goes the way that you're thinking it'll go, we're going to be down one position, but it'll be on the officer level, not on the captain level. So doesn't that still leave us with extra money that's not going to be spent, at least right away?
Yes, there's going to be some savings. For instance, let's say we promote a captain, we promote a sergeant. By the time we hire an officer, it'd be a lower salary, of course. But while in that process for the budget year, there'd be a little bit of savings until we get somebody plugged in, if that makes sense.
Do we have a number that we might be, because obviously some of our parking lot lists are things as small as a few $1,000s. And so I'm just wondering if that creates something that you can put a number to that could be part of some of the
That's a good question.
discussions tonight.
I think I wrote some notes about maybe potentially for that. Let me see if I can find it here.
Okay.
You want a hard number or an
As a
estimate?
budget committee, we don't want hard numbers.
Of course we want numbers,
But,
Jose.
I'm just saying.
Captain Gonzalez.
Yes, Counselor Waterman.
Go ahead.
No,
I was going to say, while we may be saving money on that.
Turn on your mic, please.
Right.
While we may be saving money on that position, that we will not be filling the lower position while we're waiting for that to get replaced. Without having that position, does that require any additional overtime with the rest of the officers that would be eating into that?
It could be, because once we're short somewhere, we're minimums of 2 requirement by the city. And with that, somebody's sick or we're short of personnel for vacation or family leave for whatever reasons, we had to fill up that position and it'd be an overtime cost. And overtime is usually time and a half more than the regular salary.
Thank you. That explanation helps a lot from phone calls and emails and whatnot I've been getting. that helps answer that. So hopefully all you are watching to get the answers. Thank you, Jose.
So Counselor Stearns, George and I actually chatted about that to be able to kind of get a number, and we determined maybe a couple of months based on what George was thinking, and we kind of came up to about $44,000.
Okay. And that would be good if we could say $44,000 can be taken out of police budget. I mean, you're giving me the number, but if I'm saying that right, we have $44,000 because of this for the year that we could allocate other places or not allocate all if we want to.
Yeah, it would be like a reduction to the personnel costs at the
Okay.
police side.
And we could budget with that 44,000. Okay.
Anyone? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
Any other additions?
Yes, I was thinking, do we need to discuss, since we're on the police, should we discuss the?
Any other discussion on this item? The captain.
I'm saying right to revisit, but we're good for now.
Okay. All right.
You have a question, sir?
yeah, but it's not on this topic.
Okay. Thank you.
So
Thank you,
thank you
Jose.
very much for your time.
Thank you. All right, Counselor Padden?
So my
George owes you a fritter.
So my question is, and this goes back to something that Counselor Davis had mentioned the other night. For the mayor and city council line, and this is on page 49 of the book, under general fund budget detail, mayor and city council is budgeted at $25,000. Does that line item include our stipends as well as, like, us attending the chamber luncheons and things like that? Or what is in that line item?
Training, LOC, all that stuff, I think.
Well, there's a separate one. So there's mayor and city council.
What page? I'm sorry. What did you say?
49.
49, thank you.
Yep. So there's a mayor and city council at $25,000. There's a mayor and city council travel and training at $8,500. And then there's a mayor and city council membership and dues at $5,000. So based on those numbers, I was assuming that in the mayor and council is our stipends as well as attending the chamber luncheons and things of that nature.
Yeah. Actually, your stipends are in personal services, so.
Oh, so
Yeah.
what is
Well,
in this,
why would that be? It's not,
Stipends are subject to.
if I may ask my follow-up question?
Yeah.
What is in that $25,000? What is paid out of that $25,000?
yeah.
And if we need to if you guys need to dig into that and we need to go on to like another parking lot item, that's fine. I'm just
Okay.
curious.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Well,
But
we
this is
looked
our
at it.
last budget meeting, though.
We looked at it this morning,
Oh,
and because we figured this might come up. So what's in the 25,000 are like expenses like SSW consulting for the council goals.
Oh,
So that part,
Goal
that's in
setting
there.
retreat.
There's the lunches, there's the other attorney services might be coming out of there for strictly related to council.
Okay.
Obviously, travel and training is pretty clear on its face.
Sure.
And then membership dues would be whatever you might have for, like, mayor has, I think,
OMA,
yeah, and those,
and
and so
then
anything that
the
would be.
chamber.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in your opinion, could that, knowing that some of that stuff, knowing about some of that stuff that comes out of that line, is it possible to reduce that line and still be able to function, like pare that down to like $10,000 and like kind of tighten the belt on that fund and still be able to do like the goal setting and that sort of thing?
Good question. I think when you look historically, it's gone up because prices have all gone up. There's other things in there like mediations have been in there. So I think it all depends on what happens during the year that might wind up happening with the council and the other activities that are occurring. If we reduce it, then I think then it's out there and it's known that you have less to spend than being conscientious of that moving forward. Then you would probably make decisions based on what you know you have in that line item.
Okay. Do you know what we paid for the facilitator for this year's goals?
That's SSW.
Yes, SSW. We can find that here real short.
Okay.
Council President Hensley, do you have something?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, while they're looking at that, I would like to know that number as well, because it's only been in recent years we've used a facilitator. Historically, it's been the city administrator, a whiteboard, and breakfast at Pappy's that did our goal setting. So I fear that we're spending too much money on the goal setting. But that wasn't my question. I don't even have a question. I have a comment. I would like to caution against cutting the council training budget too much. As someone who has gone to LOC conferences for every year of my 14 years on council, I feel it's a great benefit if you actually go to the conferences and actually go to the work sessions. We've had, unfortunately, some counselors in the past that will attend and not go to the work sessions. That needs to be tightened down. But for someone who has gone to every work session in the conference, I feel that it is a benefit to learn how to be a good policymaker. So I would like to caution against cutting that budget too much. I would like to know about the facilitator, though, because I have, since we've had to have a facilitator, I feel like that might be money that is not well spent, because we did a good job of doing our goal-setting training without a facilitator, other than the administrator. So when Scott gets that number, that could be a good. But I also have other ideas on how to readjust the budget when we're ready to get there. I've been working on this all weekend. I have thoughts.
So the totals that we have from invoices from SSW is $11,634.13.
Yeah.
I'll do it for half that.
Yeah. It literally was a whiteboard, the city administrator, the council and mayor at Pappy's for breakfast. We did it for like maybe $200 before. So I'm saying cut that out.
Councilor Davis, did you have?
Yeah, just very
Question,
quickly, the parking lot item I wanted on there was to eliminate the stipends for the mayor and council.
And how much is that, or where?
It's not a lot. It's.
So that's the amount that's in personal services. There is a
1,200
tax
times
deduction
six.
that's taken out of
It's
that.
$7,000,
Yeah.
$7,200.
Are you, well,
1,200 times six
1,200,
counselors.
yeah.
well, yes, but the mayor's.
Oh, and the mayor.
$200, right? So it would be
Correct.
$9,600.
I'm sorry, I just said council, so 9,006.
Question I would have to eliminate that is, and I don't know the answer, so hopefully you guys do, is the stipend within our city charter, would that require a charter amendment to get rid of that?
It may. I was talking to Emily, she was looking into that. I don't know.
Councilor
Eileen, do
Patton?
you know if that's
I
in
don't
the
know.
charter?
I can go get the charter, but
I was going to say, before we try to eliminate that as a committee, we should make sure whether or not that has to be a charter amendment, because if it's a charter amendment, we can't do that here, so.
Thank you, Sean.
Councilor Patton?
Yeah, so the train of thought that I have on this is, if there is a line item in here of mayor and council training of $8,500, rather than cutting the stipend to, and try and dig that out of personnel services and all of that stuff, if we just used our stipend essentially for attending the conference or going to chamber luncheons and those sort of things, it would be easier to essentially cut this training line and just use that stipend for those sort of things, rather than keeping the training line and then trying to dig that out, possibly run afoul of the city charter and that sort of thing. So, and it's not saving as much because it's still off by like $1,100, but at least it would be a little more trackable through this whole process, is where that rabbit hole that I was going down.
Council President Hensley.
If I may, I wasn't sure when the appropriate time to suggest this was, but I guess now's as good a time of any. As much as we know we want to do a code update, Don indicated that if we cut any deeper than he already has, we should just cut it completely. And in the last meeting, I said that if we're going to suggest that staff cut their budgets by 12%, then it was reasonable for council to readjust their goals. So if I may, I would suggest and propose that council kick the can down the road, so to speak, a year on the code update and bring that. I wrote 106, but apparently in an email it says 160, so I could have had a dyslexia that night. That's even more dollars. Kick that cut that line item for the code update and redistribute those funds. $20K to the library that we were discussing at cut, put that back in. Rounding up $24,000 to courts for the bailiff, public defender, interpreter. Rounding up parks, Canby Kids, 8,000, lights on First and Second Avenue, 12, fertilizer 7, which is a total of 27. 15,000 for Maple Street Park parking, and $6K back to the police department for Grill and Chill Bike Rodeo. That still leaves a lot of dollars to redistribute of that line item. I think that is our easiest and best way to fix this budget this year, is to redistribute your line item. And Dawn, I see you sitting here. I'm not trying to mess you up, but I'm saying
No,
that as a council, we should reevaluate our goal and push that date out for you a year.
And I'm supportive of that. I'm just here to clarify the numbers so that you all understand it. In total, it is 160, but 53,910 was already reduced initially for the May 22nd budget, and so 53.
So that's why I had the lower number in my brain. Okay.
So 5310 plus 106,090 is 160,000. So it's another 106,000.
106,1090 is what I had on my notes from last meeting. So I was right. Okay. But even so, what I've tallied up is 92,000.
Sure.
So we still have a few $1,000s, so, Scott can buy batteries and paper. I mean, I think it's an easy fix if we just kick the can down the road on your project for 1 year.
I'm not opposed to that at all. So I just wanted to clarify the amount that was, that there's 2 bites to that 160, and one of those bites had already occurred on May 22nd.
Right, and I thought so. That's why I had 106 on my yellow paper, even though 160 was in the email. I had 106,090 on my notes from last meeting. And I did some back of the napkin math, and I'm like, for 92K, we'd redistribute your line item and fix a lot of things that people are worried about and make your project just 1 year down the road.
No issues with that whatsoever.
Thank you, Don.
You're welcome.
Councilor Patton.
Yeah, so I have a counter proposal that I'll throw out as far as, just so that we can, as far as options, because I too did some digging into the numbers and had some thoughts. So if people have pen and paper ready, this is what I had sort of worked up. As far as items to fund, I had the $33,450 for courts. I also agreed that it seemed silly that finance had cut its entire supplies and services line, so I had put $5,000 back into that line. Library of $20,000. Parks for Canby kids of $8,000. And police at $6,000 for the grill and chill and the bike rodeo, which would be a total of $62,450. As far as where that money would come from, these are my justifications. I can understand the need to pay the interest back to the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund, but I think that is something that we can put on the list to do at a later time when we have more stable finances and work to make that money up. So essentially forego the library's repayment of the $15,000 to the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund for the interest portion only. $15,000 to come out of the turf reserve and work on getting that back into the budget in subsequent years. $15,000 from the mayor and council line, which would reduce that to $10,000 for us to figure out about facilitation of whatever and those sort of things. $8,500 from mayor and council. Let me just, training. And then $9,000 from the planning department. Don, when you had mentioned about the funds, I think you had said that if it got below $100,000, it wouldn't be worth it, but if it wasn't touched to $100,000, you would still have enough room to probably work on that. Was that correct?
That is correct. We would need, it would be a reduced amount of work. And so we would do a code audit the first year, and that is roughly about $100,000. That's not the code update. That's year number 2, but the code audit would be year number 1. The update would be year number 2, so.
Okay, and the reason I'm not comfortable with cutting that out of the budget is because when I had applied for an open position on council, one of the reasons I was denied that position was because I was an advocate for updating this code, and so my time would be better served with the planning commission. And the 2 years that I served on the planning commission, I was not able to get this over the finish line. And now that I am on council and have been for 2 years, I am this close, and we as a council are this close to getting this started over the finish line. And so I think this is something that we need to at least get the ball rolling on. And so with that, based on my numbers, that would come to $62,500 in savings, which would cover the $62,450 to fund those particular parking lot items and the supplies and services line to the finance department. So those are the numbers that I worked up for people's thoughts.
Council President Hensley.
Thank you. Okay, to that point, this line item is not lost on me. I do want the code updated, but as the mayor can also attest, we have a lot of history with this line item as well. The Planning Commission has historically canceled a lot of meetings. This is prior to your tenure, Dawn. I'm not speaking to you. I'm the prior planning director, canceled a lot of agenda items. My former spouse and planning chair Savory and Boatwright, there were people on the planning commission that were on the planning commission with the specific mission to address this issue. And planning commission meetings kept getting canceled. So if we're canceling it for an agenda item, we don't have a project, then we should be addressing the code. That was their mission, and it didn't happen, unfortunately. But we have volunteer planning commissioners that are willing to address this and bring those. I think that we can eat at that code project unfunded and get the ball moving forward as we've been trying to do for 10 years. So I don't want to fund it right now. If we can use that money to do the library, do parks, do the things I've already mentioned, and I'll be glad to reiterate it later if people agree with me on the commission here, that they want to do this, the courts, the parks, the Maple Street, we can do all of those things with your line item this year if the planning commission is willing to take up the mantle like we've been trying to do for many, many years.
And I don't disagree with your approach. I think it's not lost on us. In fact, we've done several code updates this last year. We have a very, very heavy plate now with the comp plan, the transportation system plan, the urban growth boundary, system development charge updates, and housing production strategy all running together concurrently. It's a lot to take on and move forward. That being said, we are looking at a composite of at least identification of issues that need to be forwarded. I can definitely ask the planning commission if they're interested in looking in like more time beyond the plan. You know, we could be using that time. I don't disagree. We have a lot to do, and the consulting service piece is going to be essential to have it done. That doesn't mean we can't be advancing that work. That, you know, if we weren't working on all those other agenda items, we have about something like 25 hearing and work session meetings between now and the end of the year. I mean, and we're working on the floodplain. That's another item that's being updated as well, which is another code element. So, like I said, what you're suggesting as at least an identification of issues, I have no issue with. Staff, I just want to put it out there, staff cannot do this by ourselves with the current workload that we have. I mean, I'm just wanting to make that clear.
I get that. I'm
Okay.
just saying that when we have planning commissioners that are available to
Yeah.
look at this and we're canceling planning commission meetings, those could be opportunities to address these items. And as you said, advance it forward, maybe not complete it,
Yeah.
but we can do this through this year, use this line item to fund these other items, the library.
And I don't want to, you know, I would be more than willing to put this off with the idea that we're still advancing it. To your point, I support that notion, and not to be
Thank you.
counter to Jason here. And I know that's important. I knew it was important when I started. And then we're also doing concept planning as well. So we have a grant, $250,000 grant from ODOT. We were talking to them this morning, and that grant is coming as well. So on top of all the other things I mentioned, we're doing concept planning, which is for the urban growth boundary. I mean, we're doing more than any jurisdiction probably in the metro area is doing right now all at once. But that being said, I don't want to make that as an excuse. We clearly can be identifying those items as we move that forward.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm not saying stop the code update. I'm just saying, let's rethink how we roll it out.
Yeah,
And
no, I'm with you. My message here is, I don't want anybody to go without, you know, by saying, hey, we absolutely are spending more on something when someone else needs it more than we do. With the notion that we're still advancing the code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Don.
Sure.
Is it, Katie, do you have something?
I just want to say really quick, the Maple Street Park project, that already includes the parking. I think you mentioned 25,000 for that.
I said 15, and because that was on the email, I believe.
Okay.
And then, but also Counselor Davis mentioned, or no, sorry, it was Counselor Patton mentioned the turf. So I don't want that to be lost either. So we can redistribute the code update funds this year and have Planning Commission take the lead on it this year. And then next year's budget, we could pick it up with consultant fees.
And I think to the extent that one suggestion I would have is we could be putting together an advanced request for proposal, assuming we would start that with consulting services next year. I think that would be a good use of our time.
Thank you.
Counselor Waterman and then Counselor Stark.
So is it safe to say that even if we weren't having these budget issues right now and we were to say, here's the money, go out and do a full press, get a consultant, what's the likelihood of that actually getting done?
We can add it on if it's a priority for the council, we will
With
make.
all the other things going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, I know, but we would add it on, but it's a lot. Yeah, it would be challenging to do that. It would probably be, something we would have to, obviously, start out with an RFP to get the consultant selected, but it's a lot to balance.
Okay.
I think part of it is just literally, you haven't seen it yet, but summer and fall, you're going to be seeing a lot of us at meetings, like every meeting. I mean, so just to that point, I mean, it would be difficult to have more meetings on that topic this year.
Thank you.
Counselor Stearns.
As I'm listening to this, a couple things I'm hearing, maybe I'm hearing it correctly or incorrectly, but it seems like you're busy this year, lots of things to do, and that there's more things to do than maybe you have time to do it. And in order to do the code update, you would have to get another employee that you will call a consultant, because you won't call them an employee, to get an extra person or persons to do the job. My question for you would be, so maybe after this year and all this stuff is done, the staff might have a little more time on their hand. If we saved the code enforcement till later, would the code, revision, be something that the staff could do within the city if they didn't have other projects? Or is it something that by necessity needs an outside firm to do?
Great question. And the nature of this urban growth boundary process, we're going to be in the same situation next year. This is a multi-year urban growth boundary process. It's not an easy process to go through in Oregon, but expanding the boundaries is incredibly important for the economic viability of the city as well as housing. Part of the information that Ryan Potter just put together today was about housing, and I think the lack of supply of land is part of the reason we have a lot less houses going in than we did before. There's interest rates issues as well, but it's significantly less, and part of that is a supply issue. So we have essentially about a 2-year process before we're going to see really a lot of daylight, because we have concept planning, we have the urban growth boundary initiation going on at the same time as that. Those processes are going to be pretty involved. Council will be pretty involved with that, and that will go on. The concept planning will go on for at least a year and a half, probably starting in August or September, going a year and a half, and then we're going to have to update our comprehensive plan, amend our comprehensive plan to bring in that property that we've expanded the boundary around. So there's a lot of steps here, and so we're out at least a couple years before we're going to have any additional capacity.
But kind of my question is the hiring of a consultant a question of capacity or a question of capability?
I would say it's both. I would say we simply don't have the staff to do a code update. They're very engaged in the long-range planning that we're doing right now. This has all been kind of delayed, and there's some economies of scale for doing this all at once. The work we're doing, the code piece of it in specific, we would, like you said, it's kind of like another staff person that we're hiring. But there also is skill sets regarding that as well. I wouldn't say that our staff is unskilled in that area, but that's not necessarily a specialty of anybody on our team that does code update. That's kind of a particular niche that the consultants have.
Okay, so it is capacity and capability.
It is both, yes.
So even if we had the capacity, we'd still have to hire a consultant.
And that's typical. I mean,
I'm not criticizing.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm curious as to.
And Clackamas County is going through the same thing right now. They're doing their code audit this year. They're going to go through the audit first year, 1 year, and then they're going to do a update the second year. Similar process. And their code is also pretty old too.
Okay. Also, for you, Jason, and for you, Tracy, both your plans neglect that the police department just gave us a gift of $44,000. So that might also go into your calculations.
So if I may, I'll expand on a couple of things. One is regarding this code update thing, and this is sort of to go part and parcel with what Don was saying. our codes are ancient. They were last updated in the early 80s. And the builders that are coming into this city are using every single loophole in those codes in order to take advantage of the city. And we are losing funds because of it. And so one of the things that was discussed when I was on the planning commission was by doing all of this urban growth boundary expansion and comprehensive planning and stuff, and starting to get the work done on the codes could be updated as we go through the comprehensive plan update, so that once the urban growth boundary expansion is completed and builders then start to try and woo those individuals to annex their land into the city, we will have updated codes that will help prevent them from using some of these loopholes. It would allow such things as, we currently have 3 housing zones. Most municipalities of our size has at least, what, 6?
Probably at least 4 or 5.
Yeah. And so because of that, we are hamstrung in being able to do higher density residential, affordable housing, those sort of things. So by doing the code updates by at least getting the consultant to start the process of combing through our current codes, what else is out there and ways to start to update ours, it will get some of that busy legwork out of the way, so that when it comes time to really getting into the meat and potatoes of the code, that is something that the city staff would be more adept to. So it would be essentially giving them options for updates, and then the planning department staff could then start to really hone in on those things, so that once the whole plan is done, we move forward with a much cleaner system, something that's more updated, and essentially would bring more revenue into the city. So and I have 2 things, so that's the first thing. Don, did I talk out of turn, or does that all make sense?
It does. I think part of that is the code is old. I recognize that. I'm not sure if I 100% agree with you that we're losing tons of money, because, I don't have really examples of that, but could it be better than it is, and could it be more catered to the variety of housing types? We're also doing that. This year, we adopted 2 codes, cottage cluster and planned unit development, which are in fact going to allow more of that diversification. Those are somewhat like overlays, and they work with the 3 zones that we have. We also have a ton of state mandates, which are de facto essentially code modifications that we have. Senate Bill 1537 just came in, and it allows up to 10 adjustments. And those are by right, and that's in any residential zone. And now everything is type 2 instead of type 3. It doesn't go to the planning commission. So the state has kind of taken over some of that already. The code clearly does need to be done in a way that provides more consistency, et cetera. You saw that firsthand in the planning commission. An audit would help with that process. I'm on the fence here. You guys need to direct this. I'm not going to be upset either way this lands.
Sure.
Is the bottom line. So,
and I might have been.
I want it to work. Bottom line is
Yeah.
I want it to work for the city. And back to Tracy's point, I think at a minimum, we could set this up so we're ready to launch. If in the worst case scenario, like that's the decision, that we have the RFP and it starts out next year, assuming that we have a budget that we can provide to them, that would be at a minimum what I would suggest, when we could be compiling the information. I think you're saying the same thing that Tracy is saying, but in a different way. But that would be staff driven versus having a consultant drive that. I think, we clearly can provide that level of what's wrong with the code, at least high level, and then we maybe could just start that with our consultant, the first thing if we have the budget next year to do that.
Well, I disagree. I think this is something that this council, that people have talked about for years getting started, and we are just foregoing it again. So anyways, that's that. Okay. The second thing regarding the $44,000, something that we need to keep in mind is that even if we narrow this down to exact numbers through this whole thing, regardless if it's Tracy or myself or Sean or somebody else that comes up with a plan, there's going to be changes. There could be overtime in the police department that we don't see. There could be some sort of crazy thing that happens legally that we don't see. And so that $44,000 might become part of a contingency. It might get eaten up in a little bit here and a little bit there. So, you know, counting on that $44,000 is a bit risky, whereas with these are actually identified line items, and the ones that Council President Hensley identified are actual like line items. And so I'd be more willing to hang my hat on that rather than this hypothetical $40-some thousand for not hiring a police officer.
Counselor Stearns? Did you have a question?
Oh, I just comment on
No.
that. Obviously, all the numbers are speculative. It's a budget, so we don't, that's why we have reserves and other kinds of things as safety nets in the budget to answer for that question. But maybe I'm misinterpreting what the police said. I mean, I'm assuming, or what Scott was saying, is assuming that they said there's a $44,000 increase or decrease in the police budget that can be applied based on this thing. If that's a firm number, then it's a firm number, as firm as any other number that we have. Obviously, if all the batteries, batch of batteries, when they go buy their batteries, then there's going to be other things that are unnecessary. But I have a question again. So often when clients of mine have budgeting problems and have big projects they need to do, one of the solutions we often come up with is to chunk out the project. In other words, instead of you're talking about anything less than 100,000 doesn't do any good, but a lot of times if you can break up an engagement so that part of it gets done in one year and then part of it gets done in another year, and you can save a lot on taxes that way. Tax planning purposes, but of course you're not a taxable organization, but also budgetary purposes where if maybe 50, and I'm just throwing something out, maybe 50,000 gets the first phase done in this budget cycle, and then another $50,000 gets the second phase done if you split it across the project across 2 budget periods. And I'm just wondering if that's a possibility as well, because I always hate to think in absolutes, 0 or 100,000. This seems like maybe a false dichotomy.
And the great thought. The one thing I can't answer, and this is on the consulting side of things, is scoping. Like, would we get the same response from consultants if consultants look at things as everybody else does in terms of like, can I do the work? Can I make a reasonable return on the work?
Well, but if you have a project that's timed to start, say, in March of next year.
Yeah. No, I think to your point though, if you split
you could have some of it paid.
Brilliant point, and to say, and then it would continue, and you're starting with 50 at mid-year or like towards. That's a brilliant point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm with you on that. I was just like, if it was 50,000 at the beginning of the fiscal year, I think we would have a limited number of people and I would be concerned we might not have folks actually submit on that. But if it was mid-year or, like going past mid-year forward and saying, yeah, there'll be another wave of work here that we're anticipating beyond that, which has not been contracted or funded through the council, but we would likely continue that work. I think that would work.
So just as a curiosity question for budgeting purposes.
Yeah.
Just for my own curiosity, the way I know budget laws work, if you entered into say $1 million contract on June 30th, but you didn't have to pay it for the next 5 years, is that still considered $1 million expenditure in year one, or for budget purposes, can you say it was a $200,000 expenditure for each of the 5 years? Even if you enter in the contract says we have to pay it, and it's.
So with budgeting, what you want to be able to do is think about what you're going to actually spend of that contract in those 5 years. So even though you signed $1 million contract, but at June 30th, but it doesn't commence until months down the road, your budget would want to reflect that next year of spending what you believe it would be spent. once you get to that point, then if the next year rolls around, you want to be able to try to estimate what you might spend on that contract in the second year, and then the third, and the fourth, and the fifth. So you want to be able to continue to budget for what you might spend of that $1 million contract.
So
It's not recognized at one time.
Yeah, that's my understanding. So, I mean, that's what I was thinking myself, but I wondered, sometimes rules are weird or whatever. And so the idea is that you could take a project, 100,000 hypothetically project, and split it over 2 budget periods and only show up as $50,000 for each budget cycle. And the contractor gets the same amount of money, everybody gets the same amount of money, we spend the same amount of money, it's just split between 2 periods.
Counselor Patton, did you have?
No, I'm chewing my finger.
Mr. Tate?
But would contractors be hesitant about taking contracts like that, service contracts, different than maybe capital contracts, when they don't know for sure that the money's coming in the next budget cycle?
I think that it would influence to a degree. I think it's a worthy idea. I mean, I would, in context here, as we all kind of sort this out, and if there's remaining budget, and let's say there's 50,000, I mean, we started that next calendar year, and that work, I think there still might be some takers that would do that. It's going to limit the pool, is my belief. I've met with a couple firms already. One of them gave us kind of a quote for what they thought it would be for the audit. I've not asked the question, obviously, to split it in half. So I probably have one firm that might be interested in that, straight up. Would there be others? I don't know. It may just be one firm.
But you wouldn't be splitting the contract in half. You would just have 2 payments. You'd be contractually obligated to make those 2 payments. So assuming the city doesn't go completely bankrupt, the person you're contracting with wouldn't have anything to worry about. In that case, we'd just be obligating the next year's budget for that extra and hypothetical $50,000.
And I think,
yeah,
and I think it's a matter of metering the work out. That's one of the challenges, on the other side of the coin for consultings, is how do I meter this work out? And because the scope should be theoretically the same scope as it would be for the 100,000 versus 50, so they would have to meter that out, which would affect schedule. But yes, could it be done? Yeah, it could be done.
And Mr. Mayor, you had a question, comment.
Thanks. First of all, just thank you to Councilor Patton and Council President Hensley for putting pen to paper and crunching some numbers. I do appreciate that very, very much. That's what we're supposed to do, and that's unfortunately the nitty gritty that we get into. To the conversation at hand about the code piece, and Councilor Stearns, your question was really interesting in terms of, by Council President Hensley's math, we have how much left over? Or quote unquote of the 160?
106,060 was the planning budget line item after he already had made his cut. And I had allocated in my napkin math, 20K back to the library, 42 to Public Works in both, mostly parks and events, and Canby Kids. It was lights, fertilizer, Maple Street turf, and Canby Kids. And then 24K to court, and then 6K back to the police for grill and chill and bike rodeo, for a total of 92. So there's still some play there for, batteries, paper, contingency.
Okay. To Councilor Patton's point too, of the code change, code redo, enhancement that we need to do. It is old. It has been a battle. I know that Mr. Varwig has also been on the planning commission and whatnot. We took it in the chin when North Redwood was being developed. And this is a prime example of, I think, why we need to make sure that we are addressing our code and making sure that we don't have that happen again. Because, yeah, I think we were taken advantage of because of the loopholes in our code. And I think that's why we ended up with way too much green space that we can't use. And we have lot sizes that just don't speak to what we wanted to achieve in the city of Canby. And so we've got to figure out how to keep that ball moving. With that said, the alternate plan of having the planning commission starting to work at that is a great idea. You're at capacity. It still means planning department still doing work to bring it to the planning commission, to bat around, decide on more work to follow up and all those things. So it's, I don't know, it's an ebb and flow of which way do you go with it in that terms. So again, I think just everybody needs that reminder that, yeah, North Redwood project was a big red glaring flag of why the code needs to be looked at and addressed.
And I'm not arguing that, as you know.
No, I know
As
you're
well
not.
as I do,
And-
how long
and
we've
may-
been trying with
maybe
our
just
planning commission.
one to Mayor, to your point, we've made changes to the planned unit development code already, and there's a significant definitional issue around usable open space. And I would not see that happening again based on our current code. But
Thank
to your point, I think those are the glaring examples that you would see on the ground, yeah.
Is it I don't know, I mean, is it we got 3 ideas on the table, in terms of using this number, I mean, can those 3 be melded together, where it's some of where Counselor Patton is suggesting from the planning line, and then, an amount that at least keeps that line item open and moving forward until next budget season, when it's conceivable that there's even the bandwidth potentially for the planning department to even tackle the code piece. Much like we had the conversation about, we don't want to divert funds from the dog park, because we do that, there's a chance that it then ends back up in purgatory for, however long, another 15 years. Same thing with conversation about, I was being facetious, but same thing with the building or the, housing code and all that, like, do we end up just kicking the ball down the road and then it ends up being like, oh, yeah, we were going to do that.
I've heard some areas of agreement, and maybe you can start there with your areas of agreement. For example, I've heard to restore the courts, to restore Canby Kids, to restore the grill and chill and the rodeo. At least those are 3 areas that I think were on both of your lists.
Is anybody disagreeing with the restoring the library? I proposed
library
that
as
right
well.
out of the gate. 20K to the library, 15 to Maple Street turf, which I think that, again, to the mayor's point, we don't want to that languish in purgatory. So that may not come back. So 15K to Maple Street turf. There was a lot of angst at losing the lights for the event. I was noticing at the last meeting, so 12,000 for the lights. Of course, we need fertilizer, so 7,000. So that was 42, so 62 total. 24 back to the courts because of the bailiff, the public defender, and interpreter. I rounded up. It's actually 23 and change. I was rounding up my numbers. And then 6,000 for the police in the Grill and Chill and Bike Rodeo, which was a total of 92 of the 106,060. So there's some money to play with there. I mean, Scott did mention batteries and paper and ink, and there's other things that it could probably go to. I'm not saying we're going to ignore the planning update. It's been on the agenda for as long as I've been on the council. I'm just saying, let's redirect some efforts instead of canceling planning commission meetings. Get the planning commissioners to look at those items when there isn't a project on the agenda. That has been on the planning commission's mind since previous commissioners have been on the commission. Unfortunately, they couldn't get there. We had a different planning director at the time and didn't have cooperation. Dawn, I feel you would be cooperative in making that happen. I have confidence that you could get the planning commission to work on this in the interim. That's what I'm saying.
And just to respond, yes, we absolutely can do what you're suggesting.
Thank you, Dawn.
Counselor Waterman,
Did you have something?
I think you had your hand up first.
I think you guys probably should finish this conversation first before I
All right.
get into
Well, yeah, no, I would just say, yeah, so I agree with, Council President Hensley's point. I agree with courts, I agree with finance, I agree with library, I agree with police. I will not agree, I think that the fertilizer is not a necessity, it is a nicety. And so therefore, it is not, there are many people that don't fertilize their lawns and stuff, and I know it is not going to look as pretty as it did, but everybody has been asked to make cuts, and so that's part of it.
So $7,000 you're not wanting, okay.
So the other thing is that one of the reasons why I went after some of these mayor and council lines is because we asked the city staff to cut their budgets by 12%. And in this budget, nothing for city council was cut. And so therefore, it behooves us, if we want to demand this from city staff, then we should be willing to put ourselves in the same saddle and ride that horse out of the gate and and use some of our stipend and other things to pay for some of these things. And so that is why I recommended not touching so that's why I recommended touching the mayor and council lines. And then when it comes to the planning thing, I will just say this: to expect the planning commissioners, who all have daytime jobs, who do not work in a planning atmosphere, to go out and do the same work that a consultant who is fluent in these matters, to go out and do that work and then not expect it to have some sort of ramification on creating yet more work for the planning department staff is a fallacy. And so therefore, that's why that is a sticking point for me. I want to see that work move forward. It was just mentioned that it is something that the council has been working on for 15 years. We don't want to ignore it, but it's been ignored for 15 years. It is time to move that forward. And so that is why I proposed what I did.
So let me, go ahead.
Councilor Waterman, did you?
Go ahead.
Or you want to
Well, I was going to
respond?
try this again, to take them item by item where there's consensus and agreement. So that's what I was going to do. But
So
go
I guess
ahead.
before you get through,
Counselor.
then I do
Yeah.
have something I'd like to bring up. There's a lot of tugging and pulling here on $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 here and there. And I know this isn't a popular subject, but I do need to go back to the reserve. And I know we have a 20%, and I don't disagree that that's a good goal. But I think, do we really understand what exactly that means? Like, what is the real world implication of 20%? What does that mean to us? As far as operating costs? Okay, so here's what it really means. So we all know the GFOA, they say their thing is a minimum of 2 months. So 2 months is 16.7%. We want 20%, that's great. What does that do for us? The difference between 16.7% and 20%, it gives us less than 2.5 weeks of operating budget out of the year. So that 2 or 3.5% is getting us 2 weeks. So we're cutting 12% of the entire year's budget of the city, police, courts, and we're going through all this stuff for 2 weeks. If the city is in a position where we use up 2 full months of operating costs, we have a lot bigger issues to deal with than worrying about whether we're going to have another 2 weeks of operating costs. Now, we don't have to go down to 16.7%. If we went down 1% to 19, you're going to take care of pretty much everything that we're sitting here trying to toggle and go around and about. So I just want to put that out there when we're looking at real world, what this actually means and what we're actually getting out of it. So I just wanted to point that out. Number two, I know it's really unpopular. It would be really unpopular. But we're sitting here talking about being fiscally responsible, tightening, doing the hard things. And we're talking about taking police, courts, library, et cetera. But not one person has talked about $17,000 that we're willing to spend in one day for a 4th of July celebration. We can cut police and stuff, but boy, we could throw a good party. So how serious are we? So I think we just need to keep this in perspective about what the results are and what it really means when we're trying to hit these numbers or percentages that we kind of stick a pin in the wall and say, hell or high water, this is where we have to be. So that's what I got as we continue negotiating here tonight. Thank you.
Council President Hensley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilor Waterman, those were good points that should have been made at the council meeting when we established the policy. So 20% is what we established and voted on. So that's where we're at. As to your point on the Independence Day celebration, I understand what you're saying. It does seem slightly frivolous. However, this community prides itself on its events. And I've proposed what I think is a good way to keep everything intact except one project that I'm only proposing to kick down the road 1 year. I'm not ignoring that the code needs to be adjusted. I'm just proposing that we readdress it and have it worked on incrementally throughout the year by the Planning Commission as they can to get it to where it might even be a smaller project for the consultant next year. I feel that what I've proposed is the best plan where we can make the library whole, we can make courts whole, we can keep our events intact that our community thrives on. And I'm standing on that.
I get that, but also the parking lot isn't the entire budget cut. The parking lot isn't the entire budget cut. That's only just what we brought up to the top of the bubble. So.
But we talked about the 20% at the last budget meet, or the last council meeting, and we voted on it, so that's where.
It was a consensus, we haven't voted on it yet. Technically, legally, we're still at 30 to 40%, which is pretty crazy considering that's almost half of the city operating budget.
Well, that's true.
So we haven't actually.
By consensus, we agreed on 20, though, and that
And I'm not
resolution's
saying,
coming next week,
and I
right?
never said that I didn't agree with the 20.
Okay.
I'm just saying, to say that heck or high water, we have to stick to that and not take into account other things and even a small percentage. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to have it. I'm just saying that it's not a,
And as I said,
Sword and
in the
stone.
last meeting, in our council meeting, I don't put a lot of faith in government agencies
Okay.
that tell us 2 months,
Great.
because
So
you know what,
then-
we are taught, since we're this high, 3 months of our expenses is a safe reserve. So that's what we do in our household, so that's what we should do in the city.
Resolution 1307, which is city code, this is our policy. In the standards section, it says, the Government Finance Officers Association and the Governmental Accounting Standards Board set policies and guidelines for public sector accounting. The City of Canby is responsible for adhering to the requirements of these organizations and for seeking guidance from policies, standards, and best practices set forth in these organizations. It also states that the City of Canby expects its finance department to get rewards, to achieving a reward from this organization. So if we're not going to trust this organization, then why are we using it as a basis in our legal code to follow?
Good question.
So,
I don't agree that we should be, but that's just me.
thank you.
So I think Counselor Stearns has something that I'm in line, I hope.
Well, I guess there's always the policy question of how much reserves we have, and whatever number we come up will be somewhat arbitrary, because that's the nature of fixed numbers, is they're arbitrary in some sense or other. My understanding is, though, that the 4th of July funds are from the tour, general fund. Is that from the general fund? Yes. Because I thought it was from the economic development.
Which is in the general.
Because it's from the
Well,
the hotel tax.
No,
Oh, it's not?
urban
Okay, so I'm-
renewal and general.
Okay, so that's interesting. Obviously, though, at this late of date, reducing, I mean, the event's pretty much planned and things are out there. It might be, if we're going to take that down, which I'm not opposed to, it probably would be better to do it with a little bit more planning instead of a month before that happens. On all these topics we're talking about, I wanted to just bring up a few more just to make more controversy, because why not?
You don't have enough?
So we don't have enough time. All right, now.
Something's on my mind, and I talked a little bit with Marissa about this. I think we have multiple ways we can do this. It doesn't have to be through just one project to be canceled. We can split. We don't have to be, as I said before, doesn't have to be false dichotomy of all or nothing on all these things. One of the things I was curious of on the library is they're kind of short $20,000, and there's $10,000 budgeted for fines and fees, and so that's 10 cents a day, I'm told, and so that's 100,000 days late on the books, from the books that they're budgeting for, and that not only is a number that is possible, but it's also, the last few years, it's been much more than that. And I thought to myself, what's stopping us from charging, instead of a dime a day, a quarter a day? That would give $15,000 right there into the budget. The other thing is that that gets you 3/4 of the way to where, as I support the $20,000 as something to restore, but as a way to get the funds from that. And then the other issue is, that interest on the transfer between the funds. Obviously, we have a current pressing need, and we're trying to balance that with a future need on the cemetery fund. And there are things we can do when we have time to restructure the budget a little bit better with plot fees and things like that can make up the difference if we need to. And also, I think in both, as I said before, Jason and for Tracy's, we're missing the $44,000 that, at least, if I understand, was adjusted in the budget by Scott there. Scott just recently from the police said they had $44,000 there. So I think we have our list of things that we want to restore, and we have our questions where the money is going to come from to restore it. I think my opinion would be that we take the $44,000 that's been offered from the police. We try to split the project on the code enforcement into 2 years, however that works out, basically by putting not a year pause on the thing, but maybe a 6-month pause, or however that works out, to make it work that way. And I think and I would like to see maybe some grace given on the library transfer fund. And then I think we've made up everything that we think is, as a council, is important. As to Jason's thing, I don't know that everybody has to give up 12%. I personally think the court shouldn't really give up anything, because one, it's a small budget and disproportionate, and the other thing is, without justice, you need to have a strong court system. Otherwise, you end up some bad things happen when they don't have a strong court system. And to counter out what Paul was saying, I think having a low, if I'm wrong, a low reserve balance does have a cost, because the first 4 months of the year, of the fiscal year, we have to borrow money either from the reserves from last year, from the ending balances of last year, and if we were to take that down to nothing, we would have a interest cost. Am I incorrect in saying that? If, let's say we brought everything down to zero, I'm just hypothetically, we would have to borrow the money between July and November, right?
Not necessarily. There's plenty of money that's sitting in our LGIP account that is across all funds. So we're not going to incur expenses that are going to get us to zero within the first couple of months before we start receiving property tax revenues.
Okay.
So I don't,
So that's not an issue, not an issue of having, but, if we spent all of our money, we would end up having 4 months of virtually no revenue.
That's a pretty bleak
I'm just saying
hypothesis
is
to
that,
happen,
yeah.
but
No,
I'm
and
not
like
sure
I
how
say,
to really answer that question.
the reserve amount is always going to be an arbitrary amount, but also.
Yes.
And my concern isn't with the exact amount, where it's going to come for council, but my concern is the direction it's going. So for me, if we decide instead of 20, it's 18, or instead of it's 20, it's 22, for me, it's not a big deal. But if I see it going down every year, and we keep adjusting it down every year, then I see a long-term problem. And that's what would concern me more than, is it 20% or 19.9? It doesn't bother me too much, but the idea is what direction are we going? Because making up, if we go below where we want to be and making it up, it's going to be very hard to do. Once you're there, it's kind of easier to keep it there, but trying to make up to a number when you're down below is difficult. So those are the things my least 4 cents.
Councilor Patton.
So while we have been talking about all this, and this is something that has been rolling around in my mind, we talk about splitting, 50,000 this year for this project and 50,000 next year, and we're gonna just move this project back a year, and we're gonna move this over here and stuff. The reason we're in this situation is because we can only raise our property taxes by 3% annually. And for many, many years, the cost of the city doing business is more than 3%. So if we are in this situation this year, you can bet that we will be in the same situation next year. And so at this same budget committee meeting in 12 months, we will be saying, ooh, we can push that out a little bit longer. And, we've said this $50,000, because if Don goes out for an RFP for this and we say, well, 50,000 now, 50,000 later, and someone signs that contract, that $50,000 is going to have to be in that next budget. And so that's $50,000 that's going to have to come from somewhere else. It has been made clear to the council at our last city council meeting that we need to find other funding mechanisms. And I personally don't see where we are going to make some sort of earth-shattering funding changes to the city in the next 12 months. That is not how this body works. And so anything that we can get done now, which is at today's dollar, compared to trying to say it's going to be something we're going to do next year at tomorrow's dollar, is already going to cost us more. So however we want to skin this cat is fine. If we want to say $50,000 from this, from the code update for this year, $44K from the police, that's $94,000 right there. That essentially meets what Council President Hensley is trying to get to. I agree with Eileen that we need to establish, I think it might be best, because we're going to just continue to go round and round in this, because I'm shaking my head, everybody else is shaking their heads. Maybe we need to do a straw poll vote on every single one of these things as to where people stand. Does a majority of the people want to see the court's funded at that amount, and finance, and so on and so forth. I would recommend breaking up the parks by the various items.
I have that listed.
Fertilizer, lights, I
Fertilizer,
understand.
lights, and Canby Kids.
Correct, and do those individually, and then the police grill and chill, and see where we stand at the end of that straw poll vote, and then figure out the money from there.
Mr. Mayor, you have a comment.
I have a question, well, comment and a
That's
question.
where I was trying to get.
I think yes. I like that idea. I think we should do that. Mr. Economic Development Director. So what is 1% from our reserves? If we go down to 19, what does that free up?
The fertilizer is 7.
1% of the general fund reserve?
Yeah, the big 20% we keep talking about.
Maple Street.
If it's 19, it's how much?
Courts, like
243,000.
From where I just rounded up to 24.
So $243,000 becomes available to us if we go from 20% to 19%.
Yeah, you're close.
1% is what I say, it's $24,389 is 1%.
Okay, that's good. Glad I clarified that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions or comments? And then do we want to start talking about individual items?
Let's just do the straw poll like Counselor Patton said.
Okay.
I mean, we've been debating this for an hour and a half and gotten nowhere, so let's go.
So I'm hearing as item number 1 that there is interest in restoring the 20,000 to the library.
Yes.
Can we all agree on that?
Yes.
20,000 to the library.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I don't vote. So I just.
Yes.
Are you? Okay. Item number 2, is there interest in restoring the courts to $25,340? So that would be the bailiff, the public defender, and the interpreter.
25,340 or 23,450?
Are we talking about court?
Court.
Yeah, so to clarify when that was presented, they brought out an 8% figure and not the 12 when they were discussed, which is why the email went out when we were looking at it. I said, this needs to be clarified.
Okay.
So the total amount, I mean, it's not very far off, is 25,350. So
Okay.
it was like an 8% to 12% was just on that 92,250.
So my
'Cause the
roundup
original
to
was 106,100.
24, I rounded up to 24, so 25, we're at 93K then.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
that's
go
fine.
back to the 106,100, which was the original budgeted number. And I think that's where you need it to be.
So is,
So was it 25 what now? It's like
25,350.
350, okay. Thank you. So still 25K, okay, so we're up to 93. I'm good still. So yeah, I'm good. for
I
court.
agree.
I'm good with court, yeah.
Yes.
okay, the next item I heard was, let's see. Restoring the grill and chill and the bike rodeo.
And that was a $6,000 for the two of them, correct?
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Restoring Canby Kids grant of 8,000.
Yes.
Yeah,
Not,
I don't want it, but I'll vote at the same time.
you're fine. This is where you get to vote.
I personally don't like giving public money to private organizations.
I understand.
It's more of a philosophy than anything else.
And I agree with you. This is just kind of one of those things that we've historically done, and it's a small amount, so.
And they do a lot for kids.
I'm okay. I'm okay with it.
I get you, Daniel. I got you.
I heard restoring 5,000 to finance.
For office supplies, et
Office
cetera.
supplies,
Yes.
all of that.
So that goes to 98. in my figures, finance. Okay. Yes, 350. I should listen to the calculation. I round numbers. But we're still under 106,090.
We are.
There was also lights, fertilizer, and Maple Street turf on the list.
Is there interest in restoring, in restoring the, I don't have a good sense of that. Is there interest in restoring the planning commission, not restoring, but is there interest in breaking the planning commission, the planning fees down to 50 and 50?
We didn't talk about the lights or the fertilizer or the parking or the turf at Maple Street for restoring those yet.
I don't think.
I'd like to know
Okay, all right.
if there's interest in restoring those before we move to where we're cutting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. So restoring,
The lights are on First and Second Avenue. It was said last meeting that the park would be lit, but the sequoias in First and Second Avenue would be dark. There seemed to be a little bit of angst, so I wrote it down on my notes, so I wanted to address that.
so that amount was how much?
12,000.
12,000?
12 for the lights, 7 for fertilizer.
12 for, okay, just,
It's labor and materials.
in my mind, I was thinking fertilizer for the,
No, separate line items, Daniel. We're not fertilizing the lights.
Okay, so how much was the lights?
12,
12,000, that's what I thought, and 7,000 for the fertilizer.
yes.
Is there interest in 12,000 for the lights?
I'd be for it because the community likes it, but I'm willing to
Not hearing.
go with the,
it's a luxury, I mean. if you
I'm
got the
willing to
money,
go with the way of the
good.
committee on
Okay.
that.
You know,
Not restoring.
Okay.
Restoring the fertilizing for 7,000.
I think it's harder to come back from dead plants. I don't know.
I can tell you as
I
a
think I'd rather go-
horticulturist, the grass will figure it out.
so I take Jason's opinion on that. I don't ever fertilize my lawn, and it doesn't look the best, but it's not bad either.
So I'm not hearing
All right.
100% consensus
So there's
on
19
that.
back. Okay.
Okay.
19K back from 98. 350.
Did we discuss the turf?
And we didn't discuss the
No.
Maple Street turf. We need to discuss that. 15K.
That's on the,
That's the reserve.
Well, the Maple
Yeah.
Street turf is technically still in,
I thought it was in the email, was it not? Maybe I misread.
no, there's the $15,000 for the Maple Street turf is already in,
The 35 was the amount that was assigned last year that we, in ending fund balance. So we would, if I remember correctly, that we wanted to try to get another 35 in there this year, but we moved it to where we would have 15 in there to where it would be at 50.
correct.
So if you remove the other 15, then we're basically back down to just having.
Still the
that reduction
35.
Of 35.
Yeah,
So
so-
I think that's where we're like,
So we're just removing the additional 15.
correct.
right.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, so there, yeah, so in my recommendation, what I would put in was this year's funding of the Maple Street turf fund of $15,000 pulling back, but it is not on the chopping block at this point in time. It was not put on the bubble. It's still in there.
Correct.
Well, it was in the email, that's why I was brought up, so, okay. So 98, 350 minus 19 minus 15. My
So if that's
adjusted
the case, the
proposal.
math that I get is for the courts, the finance, the library, the parks and police, it comes to $65,350.
Which is a little over half of the code update.
That's 64, 350.
I'm going to trust the accountant here.
What do you have for court?
So is there interest in reducing the turf reserve to 35,000 or keeping it at?
Keeping it at 35.
Keeping it at
Yeah,
35,000.
I understood the 15 to be a cut. I didn't realize we were proposing an addition. So if 15, not adding the 15, if it remains the same, I'm okay with it. I thought we were trying to cut it by 15. So that was my misunderstanding.
Got it.
Retain it 35.
Retain it.
Retain the 35. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to below that. I would prefer we can add, but I understand that we can't. So I misunderstood the memo. I thought we were cutting it by 15, so.
Is there interest in this?
Cutting that
Remaining it.
$15,000 out?
Keeping it at 35,000?
Remain at 35,
Right.
not cutting it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can do that. I just, like I said, I thought the 15 that was in the memo, I thought that was a cut and not a cut of an addition.
64, 350.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that's less, that's
With
just over half of this.
25,350 for court.
Let's do it.
Right.
6,000 for finance.
Oh, I thought it was 5.
Oh, 5. Well,
Five for
I'm gonna shut,
That's
yeah.
where your grand is.
So that's where my 1,000 is. Sorry, see, look at that. Okay, yeah,
25,
64,350.
It's, yeah. it's-
Now I'm on,
Yeah.
I'm straightened out.
What do you have? Where are we at?
You said 64,350, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So
So I have to come up with 63,350?
64, 350. And then the code update is 106,090.
Okay, so those items that we have so far, 20, 25, 350, 6,000, 8,000, 5,000, and 15,000.
What's the 15,000?
the 15.
No, the total is
$64,350.
64,350.
That's court for 25,350, finance supplies for 5, library for 20, parks for the Canby kids at 8, and police for Grill and Show and Bike Rodeo at 6, for a total of 64,350. And I propose we take it from the code update. We can split that, start the project and go over a second year if you want to do it that way. I just feel that that's the easiest way to make this happen and be clean cut.
What about that 44,000 from the police? We're missing that they just said that they're going to spend
Let them keep
40.
30 of it.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Said, let the police keep 30 of the 44, just in case of,
There you go.
that's right, take just the.
I'm good with that.
from there.
I'm just saying is that they gave us the 44, right? Saying they don't need that anymore. I mean, unless I'm misinterpreting what was.
Well, yeah, because
said.
44 would make the ask 24,350, but we could split the difference.
Oh, I'm sorry. Counselor Waterman.
So, just want to get clarification back to the mayor's question about the going from 20% to 19%. Not saying we should do that.
Counselor Waterman, do you have your mic?
Sorry.
There you go.
Let you down?
Oh, of course, Jason didn't
The
have his mic
clarification
on.
of the mayor's
Always
question
the
about the
thing.
19%, if we went from 20% to 19%.
25,000.
Yeah, so, but to go from 15% to 20%, we had to cut $600 and something thousand. So how do we get only 24,000 on 1% when it's almost 100,000 per percent, if you kind of look at that?
Because it's 1% on 20, not 1% on 5%. It's 1% over 20%, not 1% over the 5%. That's why it's not 1/5 of the 678. It's 1/20 of the whole amount.
Right. Okay.
5% of the whole reserve amount, right?
Because in order to go from 15 to 16.7%, we'd have to cut 135,000.
So the 15% that we were at was the calculation of where our total reserve was at, and in order to get to the 20%, we had to bring back in that $678,000 across the board.
Right.
For the general fund. So that was to get to the $2,438,000, but to reduce 1%, of that 20% above the line, which is strictly the calculation of operating revenue.
Okay,
So we're talking two different things.
All
We're
right.
talking revenue, and we're talking fund balance.
okay.
So the 1% is just of the revenue calculation of 20% above the line.
Okay.
Does that
Yeah.
clarify? Lots of.
So we still have $64,000 to cut.
Let me,
Let's do some quick math here. Because everything else on the list, I feel like there has been not consensus around. So these are the items short of Counselor Stearns having one objection. Everything else we've had consensus around.
Yeah, so I think what we need to do now is we need to figure out where we're going to find the money from. So places where we've identified being able to get this money from are 44,000 for police, correct?
I'm sorry.
Yes,
You
Mr.
you
Tate.
totally give up on trying to find any savings in the council's?
We're going to get there.
Oh,
We're going to do the menu. I'm going to run down the menu here that people have created. So 44,000 for police, $50,000 from planning. I proposed $15,000 in forgoed interest from the perpetual care fund.
But is that actually a savings? It just switches funds though, right?
It's that, yeah, it doesn't affect the general fund, it affects the
Yeah.
library.
Okay, then I'm gonna cross that out. We're not gonna belabor this. $15,000 from turf. 10,000,
Wasn't that already-
I'm
That's already
going
done
through the
with.
list that was proposed. We will
Okay.
then go from there. $10,000 from mayor and council. $8,500 from mayor and council training. And then the other potential is dip into reserve of 1%, which was $25,000?
24 and change.
24 and change. So we'll just say 24,000. Okay, so those are all of the areas where we can try and figure out where this
Counselor Patton, what was that last thing you said? Last line?
$24,000 from the reserve,
Oh, okay.
which would
Thank
be
you.
1% of the reserve.
So can I just make the
Okay.
point, this is the point I made the first time, is that's the reserve is set by the council, so that's not a budget committee, is not able to make that decision.
Correct.
So the council would have to make that decision, so we can't make that decision to cut that tonight, because that's a council policy,
Right.
Yes,
so.
You could make the recommendation
correct.
as
To
a
make the
budget committee
recommendation to the council, yeah.
council.
Yes, that's how that would work. So, there we go, folks. So now I guess we go down through the list to say who wants to do what.
There was some discussion about cutting out 11,000 from, did you get that?
Which what was the 11,000 from what?
For goal
The
setting?
goal-setting consultant, I would 100% be behind that before I would cut LOC training.
Yeah, that's where the $10,000
Oh,
is
that's-
essentially coming
okay.
from when it comes to mayor and council.
Okay.
That is
I'm
that amount.
totally behind that.
Okay.
Is there,
But LOC training and whatnot, I think that's essential, especially when you get new counselors that are learning how to make policy. They need those trainings, so I wouldn't want to cut that. But having a consultant come in to facilitate a goal-setting training, or goal-setting session, I'm all about cutting that.
And essentially, this $10,000 cut in that line would effectively be made up for out of the stipends. So it would be essentially, the council would fund that activity if it chooses to through its stipend.
So the stipends would stay?
The stipends
would
would
stay.
stay.
Okay,
But yeah,
But the facilitator would go.
right.
the city council training line of 8,500 would come from,
No, the 8,500,
would
no.
be from the counselors doing their.
No, it would go,
No.
the line I am talking about is mayor and city council of $25,000. That
be
would be
reduced.
reduced to $15,000.
Yes, I'm fine with that. Because that would take the facilitator for the goal setting out. Yes, I'm good with that. Hey, look at that. I agree with Jason.
Again, snow cones. Okay, so what are people's flavors? Sean, you kind of kicked it off by saying the police should be allowed to save some of that money, and you proposed them keeping 30 of the 44, so what is your thoughts?
Yeah, no, that was more just if when we were talking about that last number, that first number, what was it, $64,000 or whatever, and if that was the whole number, and I was saying leave, instead of saying take all 44, then only take 14 from planning. I was just saying to swap those, so. I mean, I think the list that you have is a pretty good list.
Well, I mean, if we add this all up, we got way more than what we need.
So this,
Right.
So if we have 50K from planning and 10K from the facilitator goal setting, that
That's 60.
leaves, we only need
That's- we only need
4350 from the
From the police.
budget, which they may need for overtime, so that would probably be good for them anyway.
So, yeah, 50K from planning, 10 from the
4,350.
from the council budget for the facilitator, and then 4350 from police, and that's our 64,350.
There's our 64,350.
Too many numbers in a row.
Oh, come on, you're a CPA, you can't do math chains?
That's $103,000.
No,
Yeah.
50K
19.6%.
from planning,
Yep.
10K from the mayor and council
For the
for this
facilitator.
facilitator for the goal setting, and then we only need to take 4,350 from the police
Oh, 4,000, I
budget.
thought you said, okay.
and that puts us at
And that's at
19.6%.
64,350.
So we're at 19.6%,
How does that change the reserve?
Yeah.
0.4%.
But how did that change? We were working with the numbers that you presented us and moving things around. How did it dip into the reserve with what you just did?
Well, the 20% above the line is still our magical 2,438,858. And our reserve amount comes to 2,384,946. So restoring expenses still takes away from, it doesn't take, it just basically still has a revenue calculation built into this. Because it's 20% of operating revenue. So that our 20% above the line has to equal 2,438,858. And adding back expenses reduces our reserve balances.
We
across all.
moved money, though. I'm not sure that we added back. We moved money, so tell me how we can fix that.
I haven't taken away anything from,
Mike, please.
Oh,
I haven't taken away anything from the professional technical services that Don had talked about. So that's still at its 100% amount. So things that you've taken away from, the 44,000 for police for just a couple months, that's reflected.
We only took 4,300 from the police.
Okay. And then adding the things back that we've already removed, such as the 6,000 for,
Yes.
Right, but we took
Correct.
away from planning and
I haven't taken
council.
planning away yet. That's what I was
Okay.
trying to say. Is,
Yeah, so we need to reduce that by
so are we
50,000.
reducing the planning by the exact amount? Because I haven't
50K.
heard what
50K.
amount.
50K.
Just 50K. Okay,
Well,
thank you.
And I don't understand why no one wants to take $44,000 from the police when they came and tell us today that they're planning on spending $44,000 less than they were a week ago or whenever this position came open. I'm just not sure why they're not asking. They said unless I'm mistaken, the 44,000 was also including the potential overtime and everything was calculated into that. But obviously if we only want to take 4,000 and give them 40,
Almost 40.
but what will they spend it on? Or that's
Well-
all it is a budget, is padding the budget. I know everybody pads their budgets, but as a policy, that's not something I think we would encourage too much.
I hear that, and I think that we can address that at the mid-year budget review and see how it's going. And I mean, it's nice to
I'm
have a
just saying that
contingency for
when somebody
overtime.
comes and says, I'm going to spend $44,000 less, I'm saying, no, don't spend $44,000 less. That just seems like it's a weird conversation.
So I guess what I will recommend then is another straw poll vote. What is being proposed here is $50,000 from planning, $10,000 from mayor and council, and $4,300 from police. By a show of hands, that gets us to where we need to be. By a show of hands, who is in favor of that breakdown?
What was police?
4350.
4,300 and, what would it be, $50?
50? Okay.
As long as the 10K from mayor and council is for the facilitator and not from training.
Yeah, we'll sort
Yes.
that out later.
No, I want it established now.
It's not from training.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're at 20.
So, okay.
We're at 20%? Okay, I'm good.
So anything,
My only thing would be to give more to because the code enforcement, or the code revision, there are things that are urgent and there are things that are important. And the code revision is something that's very, very important, but not urgent. And so I would be much more in favor of putting this important thing, because this thing, if it's done right, and I'm assuming that it'll be done right, will have a lot of beneficial effects in the future, and will go at least part of the way towards resolving some of our financial difficulties, although I'm not naive enough to think it's not a magic bullet. Whereas the police have already kind of said that they don't need the extra $44,000. And so if we can say, let's spend on something that will be an investment rather than just allowing a higher expense. And like I say, if something really bad happens, we can have a mid-year budget meeting, and there's procedures for that. But I'm sort of in my solution of pushing the code revision down a little bit was hesitant, but I thought it was a realistic solution. But I think if there is money available, that can be moved forward, because I deal with laws all the time. And laws that are not updated, we call it going feral. The law goes feral, and you have all sorts of weird results that come because no one's paying attention to it. And I think that may be what's happening to it'll happen to any law, that you just pass a law back in 1900, it was a really good law in 1900, but basically now we don't need a law against too many carriages on the street, and so we need those things to happen.
If I can maybe give some clarification from my understanding, maybe our police can help out. I don't think they said they don't need $44,000. I think they said that that's the potential savings. And if they can find a lateral police officer, they might be able to fill the position sooner. So I'd rather that they have those funds available to be able to fill the position sooner if they are able.
But I thought that would be part of the mix, because basically you're internally hiring for the higher paid position, but the lower position will be filled and cost less. But maybe I misunderstood. I think I asked several times whether the 44,000
potentially savings.
was something that he was giving to the budget, or 44
Here
was
comes the
something.
chief.
Now we'll find out for sure.
Now we find out. So maybe I misunderstood.
So I was not here, but Jose did fill me in. I'm sorry, I was late.
Yo, Hosea Fritter.
Anyways, Sean is correct. That is, it's a potential 44,000 depending on when we fill the positions. And if we do get a lateral, it could be a little bit earlier. So that's if we wait full 2 months to fill a couple positions, it's about 44,000.
Okay, so thanks for the clarification, because I was understanding it as there's 44 that we don't need to spend.
So I'd rather leave them as much money as possible to refill those positions.
Okay, so it makes
Hopefully they can do it
sense.
sooner, so.
Thanks for the clarification.
okay.
So you have the numbers?
Yes, Counselor Patton.
So I think I'm gonna get us moving down to the next phase of this.
Yay.
So I would like to, I think I need to make a motion to make these adjustments to the budget,
You need
correct?
that number for the blank. Scott, what's that number?
Well, yeah, but I don't think we're to the blank yet. I think
Yeah.
we need to make the decisions here to
That would be good.
vote to correct, to make these
Oh, gotcha.
changes in
Yeah.
this and then we'll get the new updated number to put in the main motion
Yeah.
for the budget,
Then
correct?
we'll take a break to allow Scott to give you that number to fill in, so.
Perfect,
We're not
okay.
quite done yet,
After he makes
after we. it's-
So I move that we adjust the budget as proposed in the following way. Adding $25,350 to court. Adding $5,000 to finance, specifically for supplies and services. Restoring the $20,000 to the library.
Yes.
Adding back in $8,000 to parks for specifically Canby kids. And $6,000 to police for the grill and chill and bike rodeo events. This would and then propose reducing planning by $50,000, specifically for code update, RFP or however that is, $10,000 from mayor and council tied to the facilitator, which I do not agree with because we as a group need all the facilitation we can get. And $4,360 from police in savings from hiring a police officer.
350.
4,350, yeah, I'm sorry, it looks like 60.
I'll
I'm
second that.
spazzing out here.
Oh, so we have,
Huh?
The library interest,
That's staying,
that's staying. Okay.
yeah.
We'll talk about that later, probably mid-view.
okay, so we have a motion by Counselor Padden, we have a second by Council President Hensley. All in favor?
Aye.
I,
Any opposed? One? All right, it passes. Okay, let's take a break.
okay.
Okay.
Okay. Scott's gonna crunch
Oh,
numbers.
you are abstaining, okay.
Oh, one abstention.
abstention.
So do we need to count those then, Teresa? Do we need to count your ayes and noes and abstentions for the record?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, aye, raise your hand so she can count. And then there was one no and one abstention. All right. Do you need to know who was what? It was Davis and abstain.
right, Canby, we are back in session from our break. And ready for a motion?
Yes, so Madam Chair, I will need a motion that the Budget Committee of the City of Canby approve the budget for 25-26 fiscal year in the amount of $95,582,111, and to levy property taxes for the 25-26 fiscal year in the amount of $3.4486 per 1,000 of assessed valuation for operating purposes, and 49 cents per 1,000 assessed value for the swim center local option levy.
Well, being that we've done this for 15 years, the mayor and I were just going, holy cow, that's a big number compared to our first budget we approved.
I think our first budget number
It's
was.
like 36 or something.
Wow, wow.
So with that little antidote, I move that the Budget Committee of the City Canby approve the budget for 25-26 fiscal year in the amount of $95,582,111, and to levy property taxes for the 25-26 fiscal year in the amount of $3.488 per 1,000 assessed value for operating purposes, and 49 cents per 1,000 assessed value for the swim center local option levy.
Do we have a second?
Second?
All right, it has been moved by Council President Hensley and seconded by Mr. Varwig that we approve the budget for the 2025-26 fiscal year in the amount of $95,582,111, and to levy property taxes for the 2025-26 fiscal year in the amount of $3.4886 per 1,000 of assessed value for operating purposes, and 49 cents per 1,000 of assessed value for the swim center local option levy. Any more questions or discussion? No.
Thank you,
All in
Madam Chair.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? 1, 2, any abstentions? No. All right. I think we have a budget for the 2025-26 fiscal year.
Okay.
Thank
Madam Chair, I
you
move we
all.
adjourn.
Yes. Oh, I can't second. I'm sorry. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're going to be here forever.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay.
All right. Thank you all.